I want to talk to you today about something that affects all of us, whether we're aware of it or not, and that's the inner critic. You might be more familiar with the idea of the inner child, the part of us that carries emotional wounds and unmet needs from the past. That part often gets our attention when we're doing healing work. But there's another voice in our inner psyche that's just as powerful and just as in need of our awareness. And that's the critical voice in our head, the inner critic, the one that judges, pushes, controls, and shames. And I want to be clear, this inner critic isn't just a bad habit of thinking. It's not just about negative self-talk. It's a deeper part of your psychological structure. It was formed for a reason. It has a history, it has a job, and it shows up in more ways than you might think. Many of us try to deal with the inner critic by arguing with it, silencing it, or just trying to be more positive. But that rarely works for long, because the inner critic isn't just in our thoughts. The inner critic is in our feelings, our behaviors, our emotional reactions or triggers. And the first step to changing your relationship with it is to start noticing it, noticing how the inner critic shows up, noticing when it takes over, becoming aware of those pesky thoughts, feelings, and reactions. Let's look at a few ways we can do that. One of the first places you might meet your inner critic is through your emotions, feelings like shame, guilt, anxiety, worthlessness. These aren't random. They're often signals that the critic is active, because the inner critic needs another psychic entity to control, to undermine, or even to punish, namely the inner child. The wounding of the inner child just carries on even when parents are absent or have passed away. So instead of trying to push those feelings away, it can help to pause and ask yourself, what am I believing about myself right now? What is the message underneath this feeling? You might be surprised to hear the voice that's been running in the background. It might be saying, you're not good enough, or you shouldn't have said that, or you're too much, just tone it down, or even you don't matter, or you're unlovable. These are the moments when the inner critic is loudest, but it often doesn't speak in full sentences. It can also speak through sensation, a sinking feeling, a tightness in the chest, a subtle withdrawal from the world. Another doorway into understanding the inner critic is through our behaviors. Things like procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, avoiding conflict, staying small. These are often the inner critic at work, just behind the scenes. For example, you may be putting off a project, not because you're lazy, but because the critic is whispering that you'll never do it well enough. Or you'll endlessly be tweaking something because the critic insists that unless it's perfect, you'll be judged. When you start observing yourself with gentle curiosity, not blaming yourself, but really watching, you begin to see how often the inner critic is pulling the strings. And then there are your emotional triggers. The moments when your reaction to something feels bigger than the actual situation itself. Someone gives you a look or forgets to reply to your message, and suddenly you're spiraling. You feel rejected, ashamed, perhaps not good enough. That's often a direct hit to the vulnerable part of you, and the inner critic tends to leap in right there, adding fuel to the fire. See? They don't really like you. You're too much. You should have known better. The inner critic is quick to jump on the emotional bandwagon. But that's also a moment of opportunity, because if you can catch it in the act, you can start to change this negative or joyless script. Now, I want to be really clear about something. The inner critic isn't evil. It's not out to destroy you. It's actually trying to protect you, or it was, but continues in every outdated and rigid ways. It developed as a survival strategy when you were young. Maybe you internalized a parent's high expectations or learned that love was conditional on being good, being quiet, being helpful, impressive. Maybe you figured out as a child that staying small or staying quiet kept you safe. So the inner critic took on a job to control you before anyone else could, to keep you in line, to push you to succeed, or to prevent you from being hurt again. In some way it was trying to help. It still is, but it's stuck in an old role. And that's where your adult self comes in. You don't need to get rid of the critic. In fact, you probably can't, but you can start to relate to it differently. You can become the observer of the inner critic. Rather than the one who believes it without question, you can start to speak to it gently, but firmly. You can say, I hear you. I see that you're scared. I get that you're trying to protect me, but I don't need to be spoken to like that anymore. I've got this. That's the shift. That's where healing begins. Not in silencing the inner critic, but in learning to lead it, to meet it with compassion and, importantly, boundaries, to stop letting it drive your behavior and start letting it take a back seat. This dials down the volume on your inner critic. Therapists call this process psychic externalization and separation, raising awareness of and individuating your inner child and inner critic psychic entities. This is an important stage of therapy. Why? Because you cannot change what you cannot see, and you cannot change what you don't understand. When we both see and understand the relationship between your inner critic and your inner child, something beautiful happens. Your inner world becomes less hostile, your choices become freer, you begin to trust yourself again, you start living from a place of self-leadership, not fear. That's what this work is all about. So next time you notice that tight feeling in your chest, that shrinking sense of shame, that compulsive drive to get it right, pause, ask yourself, who's speaking right now? And then see if you can show up as the adult in the room, the one who can hold space for these psychic parts of you, the child, the critic, the one who's healing them both. Because in the process of externalizing and separating these psychic entities, you are not only in more control, you are actively encouraging the development of your burgeoning, nurturing parent. Your nurturing parent is another psychic entity that, in contrast to your inner critic and inner child, is underdeveloped and will rightly need your attention. This is methodical work, but it's powerful, and you don't have to do it alone. And if you like help creating a new relationship with your inner critic, visit my website and book a free discovery call, and let's see what's possible.